with you being a pit master and Mary being a certified som, what was kind of that aha moment when the two of you decided to combine your superpowers and go into business together to create your catering company in Vindulge?
Yeah, so great question. I would say that it was a slow iterative process. So Mary started Vindulge in 2009 as a wine blog, back when blogs were kind of a diary of whatever you were doing at the moment.
Yeah.
And this was also at the same time she was studying to be a sommelier through the Court of Master Sommeliers. Over the years, I developed a passion for outdoor cooking, and she enjoyed a passion for helping with recipe creation and ideas with flavor profiles. And we started adding the recipes to the website. And that's when the website's popularity grew in, say, 2013 and 14. And from there, the brand kind of evolved. And the catering company, Ember and Vine, was created so that we could bring some of what we did to the community. And our friends at Phelps Creek Vineyard out in Hood River, they were the first ones to hire us to do an event because we were in a national competition with Traeger for their Meat Madness competition, kind of in the March Madness style.
Yeah. Oh, that would be so fun to attend.
It was fun. And we did a brisket nachos. So we did like a chili using leftover brisket, and we smothered nachos with all the toppings. And that's what we won with for their competition.
Why?
And so Phelps Creek said, hey, we'll hire you to cater. And we're like, well, okay, let's start a catering company as an offshoot of Indulge. And so that was the first foray to us working together formally. And then if you flash forward to 2020, I had an opportunity in early March to quit my day job as an insurance guy. And so I did, and we went full time together at that point. And we're still kind of plugging away at all the things. And there's also the entrepreneur piece, which was new to me as a corporate guy. So the catering company no longer exists. That kind of went away during COVID. So the Ember and Vine brand is more of my behind the scenes lurking Instagram account where I don't really post anything, but I do share stories, and I will be sharing more like what's the day in the life of Indulge look like for people.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's been great.
Do you ever look to build the catering business back up now that things are kind of bouncing back post-COVID with in-person events and everything?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we've learned, especially in the last 18 months, is we've had to have conversations around scalability and what do we want to be doing, kind of the 80-20 rule. Because sometimes as entrepreneurs, we get caught up in the 80% of the tactics and not like the creation and the ideation and what are the revenue generators of the future. So for the foreseeable future, most of what we will do in catering will be around events that are either celebrity chef events, like A Casino. We'll do a couple of those a year. Brands will fly us to be a featured chef, or we may do a winemaker dinner here and there where we can promote our cookbook. So they're more focused now as opposed to being an open catering business. If anything, we'll work with certain wineries that may want to have a certain experience created, and that's where we shine versus someone asking us, hey, can you do this event? Both our cost to do those events as well as our availability is what's tough. And if we were open for catering business, we'd be saying no a lot. And so it just doesn't seem fair to people to just constantly say no, no, no.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like you're being very intentional with how you're approaching the catering side of the business and making sure it really ties in with the work that you're doing at Vindulge. Yeah.
Exactly. I can say we can foresee an opportunity where we might collaborate with a lot of chefs around the country doing events here. So bringing chefs in from around the country, going other places and bringing our style of food there. That might be in our future next year as we have another cookbook coming out. So we're still in the process of just trying to prioritize that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my next question, which kind of, everything we were just talking about funnels into this, is what has been the most rewarding part of running Vindulge and building that business?
That's a great question. I would say the most rewarding has been when we are at our most challenging times, looking back and remembering all the small milestones that
Yeah.
get us to where we are now
Mhm.
versus living in the fear of what we could lose. So sometimes it gets overwhelming. Sometimes Google algorithms change and suddenly the traffic that we had coming before is just gone. Social media algorithms change and suddenly no one sees our content anymore. Sometimes we can get caught up in that and feel like, oh, what's next? But then we take moments, and this is all credit to Mary for the way she kind of manages the businesses. Let's look back at our successes, and we have some pretty cool stories.
Yeah.
We've been able to feature our content in like the Wall Street Journal, and we've been at all these major culinary events, and we've got another cookbook coming out. And so I think those are probably the big milestones that we're most proud of.
Mhm.
So that's, and I would also say that we grew so organically that we never knew how big we were until after COVID and we started doing events and people were flying to see us at different places.
Yeah.
So,
And just
it's
weathering
kind of,
COVID period, in
yeah,
as a business owner in the food and wine space.
yeah. Yeah, and we've tried a lot of things too. We tried doing an online wine club. We thought it'd be a great opportunity, and then it didn't work
Mhm.
because the consumer base in our community was like, well, we like to see, touch, and feel the wine before we buy. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
we've also learned a lot too about taking some risks. Some worked, some don't. But yeah, we got lucky because our cookbook came out with outdoor cooking during COVID. And even though no retail shops were buying it at the time, we did have an opportunity to sell it to a bunch of
Yeah.
people who were sitting at home wondering, what am I going to do with that travel budget? I'll buy a grill.
Yeah. Well, going along with the cookbook, my next question, and it's kind of a two-part question, and I think also what I'll do, since Mary isn't able to be with us today, I can also send her some follow-up questions if she wants to elaborate on any of these, because they are, specific to wine, but of course to food, because that is why we are here today. But I wanted to ask you, what are some of the fundamental principles that the two of you follow when pairing wine with grilled and smoked dishes? And then in addition to that, how do you adapt your wine pairing techniques with the different grilling techniques, such as grilling versus smoking of meats and vegetables?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the ways we start is that our style of live fire cooking, whether grilling, smoking, cold smoking, it all starts with honoring the protein that we're cooking
Mhm.
and not trying to nuke it with flavor.
Yeah.
That at the end of the day, if we're going to cook a brisket or if we're going to cook pork or lamb or we're going to make gazpacho out of veggies, the underlying flavor profile we want to retain and not overdo it with sauces or smoke. And when it comes to pairing with wine, we also found that there's a certain finesse. And I think, as you know, there's the contrasting flavor and complementary flavors.
Mhm.
And so we try and take whatever the final dish might be and work backwards so that the wine is showcased with the food. So if a wine is delicate, for example, and
Yeah.
something that really needs a little bit of acidity and not a lot of sweet,
Mhm.
then instead of assuming we're going to put a sauce on something, we might use pickled or umami elements to bring a flavor to complement the wine.
Yeah.
Uh, Being in Pinot Noir country, I like to credit Roland Souls for his take since he's from Texas, and that is I will take any of my Pinots and pair it with a tri-tip any day of the week.
Mhm.
It's not just for salmon, and I would agree with that. There's so much variety in the style of wines.
Yeah.
So that's what we try and bring to the pairing process, which is start with what is our underlying cooking technique.
Yep.
So for example, if we're adding smoke, smoke is an ingredient. It's a
Mhm.
flavor profile. And so if we have a smoky component to it, we want to make sure that we don't overpower a wine that doesn't do well with that type of flavor.
Yeah.
So that's an example. We also like to take the contrasting flavors So if we want to put a little heat or a lot of umami flavors into something, especially when grilling, or we want to add a nice chimichurri with a nice acidic garlicky flavor, then we may use different pairing options on the wine side for that. And
Yeah.
that's definitely our approach.
And I think, everything that you just said made total sense as far as how you approached the dish at Eggfest, because I remember at Eggfest you had the cedar plank salmon, and was it with like a hickory? It had like, it was like hickory rubbed, or what was the preparation in that dish?
Yeah, so the funny story about that dish is that it is literally the dish that got us our cookbook deal. So the
Yeah.
photograph of our cedar plank salmon was on our book proposal, and it is salmon, which is rubbed with a chipotle chili powder rub.
Like the Chipotle.
Uh,
Yeah.
and we cook it on cedar. You could also use alder, which is a little subtler flavor. And then we finish it with a very simple maple syrup glaze, just a light
Yeah.
glaze of maple syrup, which then sets a little bit, and the sweet offsets the chipotle flavor. And then you've got that rich, buttery salmon flavor. And that was paired, with a red wine. So,
And
yeah.
that was such a knockout pairing. And just as you were saying that, it like brought me right back to Eggfest, because I just remember the touch of sweetness with the maple syrup, and then the chipotle and the smokiness of that dish. It paired beautifully with, I think it was a Stoller Pinot Noir that was the 2016. And they had a little bit of new oak in that wine. I think it was like 30% new oak in the winemaking process. And I just found that the subtle oak elements of the wine really complemented the salmon so well, and they just were, to your point, that elegant and just a lot of finesse in that pairing.
Thank you. Yeah, it can get nerve wracking whenever we're trying to put together that showcase, but the team at Stoller took great care to take each of the chef courses. So a little behind the scenes, what we tried to do is get every chef to say, what do you want to cook first?
Mhm.
And then Stoller's team came back and said, here's what I think are the ideal matches for those
Yeah.
items.
Yeah.
And I thought that they did a great job with all the different dishes. So
Yeah. I mean, everything, I left that event so happily full, and yeah, I almost went back for seconds of the salmon. It was so delicious. So again, like it was a knockout. Um, And then the next question I have is, part of my work with Barrel Dork is helping folks create their home collection so that they always have the perfect bottles of wine on hand at home to open for any occasion and for their unique lifestyle. And so for folks who love to barbecue, especially during the summer months, what are some wines that they should stock up on? And what are some favorite wines with grilled or smoked dishes that are kind of just no-brainer pairings?
yeah, well, that's a great question. That's a big question.
I know, sorry.
That's okay. Keep them coming, and I'll definitely make sure Mary follows up, because I know
Yeah.
that she's much closer to the actual pairings. But I'd say that if we were to kind of channel what we have in any given time, we always have Zinfandel,
Yep.
Lodi, Amador County, Pacific Coast, Northern California, Zinfandels, especially because they tend to have a lot more age-worthy characteristics, and they can handle more variety of flavors. So if a lot of times we'll cook meat, for example, and we'll have different sauces on the side.
Yeah.
I think for us that presents better, because then people can pick and choose what they want, and the Zinfandel tends to allow more options for different varieties of sauces. So if you have acidic sauces or sweet sauces, Zinfandel can kind of mix and match. It's like a chameleon of wine.
Yeah.
So that's something we always have. Rosé, especially rosé, the acidity levels, and the versatility of rosé of all types, I think is something that we always have in the fridge, because it's a great wine for the kickoff, or it's a great wine that'll match almost any dish.
Mhm.
And sparkling wine. Now
Yep.
Mary's a champagne person, right? She loves champagne. Who doesn't?
A lot of
Um,
certified somms and like people in the wine industry, that is where they geek out, is in
yeah.
champagne and sparkling wines.
Yeah, I would say that sparkling wine in general is probably the most versatile food wine
Yeah.
ever.
Yep.
You can we went to a sparkling wine pairing dinner in New Orleans, and they showcased all different styles of champagne. And I would argue that the same would apply to sparkling wines from around the US and the world. And I worked with every single dish. There was not a dish from opening course, amuse bouche, all the way to desserts where they couldn't find a sparkling wine pairing option.
Mhm.
And that I can't think of any other varietal that or blend that could provide that same level of versatility. So there's always some sparkling wine in our fridge. And there's so many different price points. I mean, we go to Gruet in New Mexico. It's a great value buy.
Yeah.
It has great
I love
acidity.
Brew. They have some great stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also some great wines out of the Willamette Valley with like Six Peaks up at the top of Bald Peak Mountain, which makes an incredible sparkling wine in Oregon for
I
under
haven't had their
$50.
wine, so I gotta, yeah, definitely try
Yeah.
that.
You got to try it because we think it's one of the best sparkling wines under $50 in the
Oh,
Northwest.
okay, writing this down.
And so I think that as Oregon finds their way in the sparkling wine space, they're charging for the most part champagne prices. And
Yeah.
so sometimes I push back to winemakers and owners saying, I get it, long term, you're looking for new club members, but there's some great buys out there too.
Yeah.
In Method Champenois where they're not necessarily $70 or $80 a bottle. So
Yep.
yeah, you got to check them out too.
Yeah. Okay, great. And I also think, going along with just the versatility and pairings, I also think sparkling wine and champagne is so perfect because with barbecuing and grilling, a lot of times you're doing it as part of a gathering or a party or a cookout with loved ones. And who doesn't love opening a bottle of bubbles and celebrating those moments? And so it's kind of so it's versatile from a social aspect, but also from a food pairing aspect as well.
Yeah, and I think you really highlighted one of the joys that we like to bring. So yes, we have recipes. There's a lot of blogs out there that have recipes online. And what we're hoping to do for people is bring experiences, because when you're around fire, when you're around the kitchen, there's a reason why parties usually begin and end around the kitchen or around the grill. And it's because we're all together communing around food. We've been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years as a species.
Yeah.
And the Eggfest, I think, was an example of that at a bigger scale where, that sparkling wine is a great option when you're together. Another great varietal that doesn't get a lot of love is Carmenere. And I know we don't have a lot of it in Oregon, but
Yeah.
our friends at Blizzard are bringing some in and making it out of Southeast Washington. And that's another great wine with some nice acidity. It's not overly tannic, but it has enough structure that it's age worthy and really good with barbecue. That's another one too.
Okay, great. And then kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, are there any wines that you find to be challenging to pair with grilled or smoked dishes?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think that sometimes some dessert wines can be difficult. So I think specifically tawny ports or ice wines. Those tend to be a little more difficult with our genre of food because they tend to get lost in some of the food that we make.
Yeah.
More nuanced wines that come out of different parts of the world, like a Certico out of Santorini, and some Mediterranean varietals are sometimes a little difficult because warmer climates tend to make them a little less acidic forward. So I think what we try and do, that we love acidic wines. We love wines that have a great balance and kind of that bites. And so as you kind of move out of the acidic category, even if we don't use the technical acidic term, but just like how it presents itself, that's when it tends to get a little more difficult for us to pair, and we'll tend to shy away from it. But we're not afraid of whites, like pairing whites, like a nice Chardonnay, whether it's oaked or unoaked. We'll dive right into that one. I mean, scallops, grilled shrimp, cold smoked things, smoked gazpacho. Like there's a lot of fun things to do with wood, because when we bring that wood flavor into something, it really highlights that. Sauvignon Blanc is another fun one.
Yeah.
Especially out of California, the Sauvignon Blancs bring a certain flavor profile that's really fun to add to grilled dishes, especially.
And I also encourage people to, pair white wines with red meats sometimes. And at Eggfest, I forget who was making, it was the beef taco that was topped with the avocado crema. And it definitely had some really bright acidic notes to the dish. And they paired it with the Stoller Sauvignon Blanc. And that was just a knockout pairing. But, again, it's a steak taco. And so it's like, you can still paint outside the lines when it comes to food and wine pairings. And it's not always white wine with fish or white wine or red wine with red meat, but get experimental. And I think also just looking at the other components of the dish, such as the avocado crema, which was really good with a Sauvignon Blanc and everything. So
Yeah, that was Eddie and Sarah. And I think you bring a great point up is that we try and focus on the protein, but if you put a really fun topping on that has a very
yeah,
pronounced flavor profile, that's probably what you want to match your wine to. So if you have onion and shallots and the crema component on a steak, traditionally you might drop to a red, but with that, that finishing bite, a white's
yeah,
probably a better option, which I think is a really fun way to change around the narrative a little bit about your traditional food and wine pairing.
absolutely. Okay. And then this is a question, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but how has living in the Pacific Northwest influenced your cooking and wine pairing philosophies?
Oh, great question. I would say we learn something new every day, and we try to present our food that is from here.
Mhm.
Doesn't always mean that we're sourcing from here, but it means if we're traveling to an event in Atlanta, we're not trying to make Carolina barbecue. We're not trying to make Texas barbecue.
Yeah.
We're making food that is inspired by living in the Northwest. Some would argue it's the birth of the farm to table movement, although there's a few parts of the country that would push back on that.
Yep.
But we're not afraid to bring that farm to table experience to wherever we go. So we love cooking fish. We love cooking lamb. We love cooking pork, all very abundant things here in the Northwest. We love vegetables and bringing those things together. And I think that that has what's been the biggest influence for us. And as we travel around and spend time with chefs here, I think that what the Northwest offers more so than anything else is the permission for fusion and to bring their point of view and their background into the food. And
Mhm.
that's what showcases the story that they're trying to tell. Sad news with Naomi Pomeroy, obviously passing away over the weekend. And she was a big inspiration for us because she literally started her business in her kitchen and created pop-ups and brought all the flavors that were within like a 50-mile radius in. And when we went to Beast and experienced some of her restaurant scene and others like her, those were all things that got us really excited. So when we are presenting now at different events, we try and bring that. We try and bring the story like this is from a farmer in McMinnville, or we're doing coastal salmon or Dungeness or cattle from Central Washington, and we're adding our little twist to it. And that's what we try to do so that we stand out in a very crowded marketplace of barbecue people, but
Yeah.
also because it's like what we like to eat.
And it's also where you shine, and people can really see that rather than you trying to follow someone else's or another regional script. You're really showcasing what you excel at and what is so unique about here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, and I'm glad you experienced that at the Egg Fest, because at the Egg Fest, we wanted to deliberately find people from around the country who represented their authentic food.
Yeah.
And there's great restaurants here. Matt's Barbecue does some great Texas style barbecue. He travels to Texas,
Mhm.
brings his team to Texas.
Yeah.
Those are all great, but there's something to be said about having someone from South Carolina who runs a South Carolina restaurant to come in and present his food when he lives in the low country. And so that to us is important so that there's some authenticity to the origination of that food.
Yeah.
And it's okay for others to have influence by it. We were influenced by the Carolinas, but yeah, that's ultimately our goal over time is to also introduce people to different flavors
Mhm.
from people who are actually making it.
Yeah. And then it also, ties in with the whole travel piece, and literally, people don't have to leave if they can't travel to the Pacific Northwest, if they're at an event of yours in Texas, they can still get a small slice of what it's like living here and just seeing, yeah, it's, kind of like that passport, like the cuisine passport, for lack of a better term there, but I'm sure there's some like punchy marketing in there.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, and talking about Naomi, this also brings up one of my next questions is, do you have any mentors or influential figures in the food and wine industry that have really inspired your journey? And I know it's probably a long list, but any key highlights?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple that stand out. So when we started our catering company, we worked with the executive chef at Vino Paradiso, a restaurant that no longer exists.
Mhm.
Um, Chef Adam Rupplinger, he came from running restaurants in Minnesota and came out and worked there. We became friends, and he worked with us on everything from menu creation, scalability, just the ins and outs, because I don't have a culinary background, a trained
Right.
background in the kitchen. Um, and I think that there's different chefs that we have continued to follow. Some have retired. I know Mary's aha moment was Chef Mavro in Hawaii, where she had short ribs after being a vegetarian for 10 years. And those short ribs changed her life literally, and gave
Oh,
her
I can
permission to
imagine.
seek out great food.
Yeah.
So definitely got to give a shout out to Chef Mavro, because then I'm like, all right, I'll find short ribs tomorrow and start cooking them. Uh, and then locally and nationally, as we've started to interact more with chefs from Andrew Zimmern to Robert Irvine to Alton Brown, like I think the inspiration we're finding from those we really connect with are those who are true to themselves
Mhm.
and bring their point of view, regardless of the showability of it.
Yeah.
And so I think we're trying to emulate that, so that it's not about if we're on a Food Network show or a Netflix show or on TV. It's more about we're there to serve great food to people who may not have an opportunity to taste those types of foods on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I think Elton Brown is a great example. When you meet him in person, he is exactly what you see on Good Eats and on his Instagram feed. He's so authentic. He's
Yeah.
so curious. And for us, we love that curiosity as a way for us to continue to reinvent ourselves every day. So those are just a few examples. But I mean, locally, Greg Day, I mean,
Yeah.
looking at his cuisine and how meaningful that is to him and his life and his experience. So those are just a few examples, but yeah.
Oh,
And
those are
sometimes it's food carts. We'll go to
examples.
a
Yeah.
food cart and we're like,
Yeah.
where did you come from? Because this
Oh
food
yeah.
is amazing. This is so it could be anywhere that we get the inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. Those little micro inspirations for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and then couple of final questions, because I know we're getting closer. Well, we've passed the time allotment already, but one question I had, kind of like a rapid fire question, and this kind of ties into your fire and wine cookbook, is that the scenario is, it's a beautiful summer night. You have out of town friends who just happen to be passing through your neighborhood for the night. So you decide to throw an impromptu backyard barbecue. What is the on the fly meal that you're whipping up for the occasion? And then what wine are you pulling out of your wine fridge to accompany the meal?
This is funny. This literally just happened.
Good.
So I will say that for an appetizer, we're always going to go to our smoked bone marrow
Okay.
with a baguette, because I just love gluten. It doesn't love me, but I love it, and it's a perfect.
Ditto.
And we also jump to our smoked tomato gazpacho, because it's easy to make and have a batch around, and that's in the cookbook. And pairs well with like that nice rosé or sparkling opener, as does the bone marrow. And then the other one that I love, I know Mary may have a different answer, but I love our New York strip served with a savory duck fat granola.
Oh my
And
God.
so
I love that you
it's,
also just have all of this on hand. I'm like, I don't have bone
yeah,
on hand. I don't have duck fat on hand, but
I
you're
know.
you're chefs. You know what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Since we do this for a living, a lot of times we have the pantry of stuff.
Yeah, makes sense.
However, if I went on the complete opposite end, it's going to be a smoked burger with a smoked burger that will then press down smash burger style with some cheddar
Oh
cheese
yeah.
from Tillum. Like,
Yep.
there you go. It's like we're just going to fire that up.
Yep. That, I mean, I'm getting hungry just hearing all about this. And so what are the wines that you're pulling out for it?
Well, on the burger front, we're gonna go Zinfandel.
Mhm.
On the more bougie course, we're gonna start with a sparkling wine. We always have Gruet in the fridge.
Yep.
We're probably gonna go with the rosé. The Stoller rosé is fantastic. Aix-en-Provence has some great stuff too that come out with various brands. And then for the reds, if we're doing the savory duck fat granola, a lot of times we're gonna go to something like a Merlot or a Carmenere, as I mentioned. New York's have a nice marbling structure, so so they can handle something a little more tannin. So that's when we'll dip into those. If it's a hot summer night, though, we'll do a Pinot. We'll do a bigger Pinot
Yeah.
because it can handle it, and the duck fat really kind of softens everything.
Yep.
And so yeah, we'll like to wow people because if there's anything we have a fair amount of, it's Pinot Noir in our
Yeah.
fridge.
Okay. Well, I'll have to let you know next time I'm passing through the
Yes,
the area
yes.
because this all sounds so delicious. And then I also, know from just reading a bit about you and Mary that you love to travel. So what has been your favorite travel destination for food and wine enthusiast? And then what's a destination that's still on your bucket list to explore?
Well, we're going to Portugal, which has been on our list in 2 weeks. So we've heard nothing but amazing things, and we're going to go out to Porto and experience that.
Yep.
My favorite experience was Brazil. Brazil has an up and coming wine region that very few people know about because they haven't found a way to export it into the United States yet. The affordability down there and the ability for getting down is the expensive part, but once you're there, it's incredibly inexpensive and it's a beautiful wine region down
Yeah.
south.
What's the wine
So
region
that
and where are the varietals that they grow the most?
so Bento Gonçalves is the town way south. I forget the state that it's in, which I'm sure someone is now going to remind me. Something Sud. Oh gosh, I should know, but maybe I'll email you.
Yeah. I'll have to
Um,
look it up as well because I've never been
yeah,
to Brazil. I would love to go. So
So when I was down there, we had an incredible array of sparkling wine. So it's an Italian influenced wine region. So when the Italians immigrated to southern Brazil, they brought their food and they brought their wine cuttings.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the wines down there are in the Prosecco style and are moving into Method Champenois, and the pricing on them is incredible, like
Yeah.
18 to 25 US dollars.
Yeah.
And then they also have other varietals, but when you go there, it's like being in Hawaii. So you've
Mhm.
got this tropical climate and a mountain desert
Heat.
shadow. So there's different regional
Yeah.
expressions. So they got high altitude big reds, and then they've got these amazing like tropical experiences. So it's a really cool place to go if you can.
Yeah.
I know I won't speak for Mary, but I know that she loved Santorini and her whole Greece experience, just the
I read
Mediterranean. She
about
loves,
that. Yeah.
yeah. And she loves Italy. Like every time she has a chance to go to Italy, not only does it inspire her with food pairings, but she comes back with some really fun wine stories. And so that's
Yeah.
always fun.
I know it's hard not to love Italy. So my husband and I just got back from a trip to Piedmont and I'm like, so we're going next summer, right? But like we're just gonna make this an annual thing. So yeah,
Nice.
I get that love. And then final question, I'm obviously going to be sharing this interview with my Barrel Dork enthusiast, and I'm sure everyone will want to check out your Fire and Wine cookbook. So where would you recommend they go and buy?
Well, if you're local, they sell it at Powell's, or they
Yeah.
should. So we're always a big fan of supporting local. You can
Great.
also go to
Love it.
indieboundbooks.org.
Okay.
Indieboundbooks.org has all the local bookstores that sell different books around the country. It's available at Amazon.
Okay.
And if you want a signed copy, you can grab a signed copy from our website,
Okay.
vindulge.com. It's also available locally at Zupan's. So you can go to any Zupan's market where they sell our barbecue sauce and our cookbooks. So you can get one of those too. And if you ever come to an event of ours, we're happy to sign it.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sean. I know we went a bit over our time here, but I think that everything that we chatted about today has been so valuable and I'm really hungry now. So,
Well,
but
thank you for having me and Mary and for coming to the Eggfest.
yeah.
We're already excited for next year to do it again.
Yep.
And so we appreciate the opportunity to chat with your
Yeah.
audience. So thank you.
Absolutely. And enjoy your trip to Porto. You will absolutely love it. I went there 2019 and it was so cool. So Yeah.
That's what we've heard. We've heard a lot of good things. So we're excited.
You'll have to bring back a bunch of tawny ports for your dessert courses. You know, maybe I
We
know they're
will.
hard to pair with grilling, but they're really good with dessert as you know.
We're definitely gonna have to do some research.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Do plenty. Go to all the port houses and go up to the Douro Valley. You'll love it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
See you later. Thank you
Thanks,
so
Meg.
much. Yep. Safe
Take
travels.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.